friends, it's Christy. So excited to be back with you on the Lawnfawn YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using the brand new A Mole Lot of Love, plus Garden Before and Afters, Merry Mice, all the Santa hats, and all the speech bubbles. I've stamped the images on alcohol marker friendly cardstock with Lawnfawn jet black ink, and I'm going to be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm going to start with this adorable little mole, and I decided to go with some warm grays for him. So I'm going to use W3, W5, and W7. I'm going to lay in my shadows first with that W7, putting those down his back, and then also along the edges of the handle of that shovel where that would be casting a little bit of a shadow. I did a really small one there, both above and below. And then I'm going to start blending that out with the W5. That's going to be my midtone. Just making sure to go over the edge of that W7 and pull that darkest color into the midtone so that I get a nice smooth blend. And then I'll repeat that same process, switching to the W3 for my highlight. And I really think that combo looks so cute on him. I'm going to take that W7 and just fill in his nose solid since it's such a small little area. And then I'm going to switch to some lighter shades. I'm going to keep that W3, but I'm going to add in W00 and W1. And these are the shades that I'm going to use for my shovel. I just wanted something that would stand out against the rest of his body, so I used the W3 as the darkest, blended out with the W1 and then the W00. I also used the W1 and W00 for my speech bubble and the white parts on my Santa hat, just to give those a little bit of shading, and I left the white cardstock as the highlight. For his muzzle, his hands, feet, and tail, I wanted to go with kind of like a peachy skin tone. And so I'm going to bring in E00, E93, and E95. I also have E97 and E99 laid out, but I'm not going to use those on him. For him, I'm just using the lightest three shades there, starting with that E95, blending out with the E93, and then using the E00 as the highlight. And I'm really happy with how that turned out. I thought that looked really sweet. I'm going to use these same shades for my earthworms. So again, I'm starting with the E95 and then blending down with the lighter shades. And I'm coloring right over the entire area of their body. But then I'm going to come back in and start doing every other stripe with the darkest shades. I'm going to bring in the E99 first, and then I'll use the E97. And I did squeeze in that E95 as well. These little earthworms always make me think of Slimy from Sesame Street. He was Oscar the Grouch's pet worm, and so I just can't help coloring them like him. I added some rosy cheeks to my mole and some tiny ones to my worms with R20 and R22. I'm going to keep that R22 and add in R24 and R29, and I'm going to use these to color in my Santa hat and also my little plant pot, because my idea for this card was that the mole is bringing the earthworms a Christmas tree, and he's going to plant it in the little clearing in the woods where they live so that they have their own tree to enjoy. So I wanted that to be a festive shade, so I went with red using R29 first, then R24, and then the R22 for the highlight. I'll switch to E43, E44, and E47 for the dirt. I'm going to add that E47 in first, adding it mainly to the bottom, but also just accenting some of those drawn lines that are there so that it indicates kind of like some little disturbances in the earth. And then I'm going to blend out with the E44 and then use the E43 for a nice highlight. Then I'll switch to a different brown combo. I'm using E21, E23 and E25 for the trunk of my Christmas tree and also the handle of my shovel. So I'm going to use that E25 first for those, blend out with the E23, and I'll add a little bit of that E21 on there as well. And then I'm going to bring in my green shades for the tree. I'm using YG61, YG63, and YG67. I'm going to start at the bottom scallop of each of those sections of the tree, and I'm going to flick upward with the darkest shade first using that YG67. Then I'll add in the YG63, just kind of splitting each of those sections into thirds and making sure to go over the previous shade and pull it up with it so that it gets a nice smooth blend. And then I'll come in with that highlight shade, the YG61, to finish that off. And I did do a second layer off screen on the tree just to smooth out that blend a little bit better and increase the saturation. Then I'm going to bring in Y11 with YR21 and YR23 for my gold star on top of the tree. The mole is going to leave the decorating of the tree to the earthworms, but he did go ahead and add a special star to the top for them. So now I'm just going to trim all of these images out with their matching dies. For my focal panel, I'm going to be using some pattern paper from the All the Sparkles Petite paper pack. I'm going to tear out this sheet that is black with the gold foil stars, and it is going to create the most gorgeous night sky. I'm going to trim that down with the second largest of the stitched circle stackables. I also trimmed down an extra circle of plain white and a snowdrift using the stitched hillside borders. I'm going to glue the pattern paper piece to the plain white piece with my glue tube just to make that a little bit more sturdy. I love how that gold foiling catches the light as you tip that cardstock. I'm going to add the snowdrift down at the bottom of the panel, just making sure that the stars are pointing the way that I want them. And I'm going to set this piece aside to dry and start to work on my card base. I'm going to take a piece of Noble Fir Cardstock and die cut that using the Checkered Hearts Backdrop Portrait. And I did use my metal shim from Lawnfawn when I ran this through my die cutting machine to make sure that my die just cut perfectly. Now I'm going to carefully go around the edges and add some glue, and then I'll also add some glue in the center so that it's held down well. I'm going to attach that to a lobster card base. So it is a standard A2 size card that I trimmed down to be 4 1/4 wide by 5 1/2 tall. And then I'm going to take an extra scrap of lobster cardstock and die cut the giant Be Merry. I also cut that out of 3 pieces of white cardstock and stacked those together, gluing them in between to make that a little bit more raised. And now I'm going to add the red lobster piece on top. So I'm just carefully adding my glue, just squirting out the barest amount and then using the nozzle of the glue tube to kind of drag that glue around so that I don't have any kind of splooging out where I don't want it. Just using the barest amount to hold that in place. And then I'm going to set that down just slightly off center toward the left to create a drop shadow with that white cardstock. I'll just make sure that that is on there how I want it and then let that dry as well. Since my card base is that nice rich red, I'm going to do an insert for the inside so that I can write my greeting to the recipient. I'm going to stamp it in some Noble Fir ink to match the cardstock on the backdrop. And I'm going to take a sentiment from Say What Holiday Critters and add that to some images from A Mole Lot of Love and Merry Mice. And now that I've got all of my elements prepped and ready to go, I'm ready to start assembling this card. I'm going to take that insert and glue that to the inside, and I just trim that down to be slightly smaller than the card base so I get that nice border of red cardstock on the edges, which I think looks so nice. Then I'm going to take my focal panel and my Be Merry sentiment, and I'm going to figure out where I want those on the card. I'll glue the focal panel down. I'm just adding the glue in the very center so that the edges will kind of lift up a bit and give some more dimension. And then I will add some more liquid glue to the back of that giant Be Merry sentiment. And I'm going to glue that down so that it overlaps the bottom snowdrift of the focal panel so that the focal panel and the sentiment just are very integrated into each other on the front of this card. And I am just taking my time to really center that on the card how I want it. I want to have the same amount of space from the top of the focal panel to the top edge of the card as from the bottom of the sentiment to the bottom edge of the card, so that spatially it just all looks very even and nice. So I'm just going to press that down into place and bring in my images. I like to start with my largest image first, so I'm going to take that tree and add it to the top of the highest point of the snowdrift, and then I will grab my little mole and I will add him over toward the right hand side, toward the top of the snowdrift there. Then I'm going to take the little Santa hat and add that to the top of his head so that he looks really festive. And he's kind of acting as Santa since he's bringing the earthworms their Christmas tree. And I'll just add that little pot right below the trunk of the tree, or just overlapping the trunk of the tree so that it looks like it's sitting inside the pot. And I'll add the star to the very top of the tree. And that's kind of hanging off the very edge of the focal panel, but that's okay. I kind of like how that makes it seem as if the tree is so large that it can't quite fit inside the scene. I added the earthworm that is popping out of the dirt over on the left-hand side, and then I'll have the other one over on the right to balance that out. And then I'm going to have that holy moly sentiment just above the mole, because it just ties in so well with him. Of course, this card needs a bit of sparkle. All Christmas cards do, in my opinion. So I'm going to add some Stardust stickles to the top of the snowdrift. I added it to the star on the tree, to the pot that the tree is in, and the white parts of the Santa hat. And then I'm also going to add it to my die-cut giant Be Merry sentiment. I'm going to take that about not quite halfway up each of the letters in the bottom part, and then I'll also follow the bottom edge of the scripty letters in the top part of that sentiment, and I think that just really pulls the whole thing together. So I'm going to lift up this card so you can see it in a bit more detail, see some of the flash of gold foiling on that pattern paper, and give you another peek at the inside. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and leave me a comment down below. I love to hear from you. And thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you had a good one, and I'll see you soon in another video. Bye-bye!